director of bands at League City Intermediate and Clear Creek ISD. Prior to his current role, he taught at Victory Lakes Intermediate and Barry Miller Junior High School in Pearland. At League City Intermediate, Mr. Parsons teaches the beginning brass classes, assists with the symphonic band, and directs their wind ensemble. His bands have achieved tremendous awards and recognition. Most notably, in 2025, his wind ensemble was named a state semifinalist in the TMEA Triple C Honor Band Contest and a national winner in the Mark of Excellence National Wind Band Honors Competition, and earned the title of Grand Champion in the Gator Music Festival in Dickinson, Texas. So I now turn it over to Mr. Bennett Parsons.
Well, that was quite the introduction. I really appreciate it, Greg. And I'm excited to be here with everybody. Thank you for having me. So a little bit more about me. I play the euphonium. I went to TCU in Fort Worth, and I got a master's degree from the University of Houston Clear Lake in instructional design. I'm a euphonium player, and I've been fortunate to get to hang out with a lot of other great musicians in the Houston area in the Magnolia City Brass Band, Houston Brass Band, and Texas Low Brass Academy. Like Greg said, my experience, I have 16 years in the classroom, and I've gotten to teach a lot of different levels of beginner students. So I've gotten to teach beginners in homogeneous classes, which is what we're fortunate to have in my school district in Texas. But I've also gotten to teach, different configurations of beginner brass. And so that's kind of where my background is and my passion for trying to help students, because they're all going to come to you in different ways. And I'm hopeful that this session will provide you some information, some tools to help you be able to meet your students in whatever configuration you see them every day. So the goals for this session is to help really just lay a firm foundation for your beginner brass students. We don't have time to get into all the ins and outs. Like, this won't really be a clinic about how to do your whole year. It's really focused on basically the first 6 weeks, the first weeks where you're teaching your students how to do everything. And again, understanding that there are several people who may have different experiences where they're going to have, a mixed brass class, or you might not be starting tubas the first year. Hopefully this will give you some information to be able to help that tuba player you might have in your band be able to be independent while you're working with students in all sorts of different things. There might also be things that you already do in this session, which is great. It's fun to get to be in a session where someone validates what you're doing, because sometimes you have those second thoughts where you're like, should I really be going this fast? Should I really be doing it this way? And just seeing someone else say, yeah, that's the way I do it too, really helps with that. So in my toolbox, we have lots of different things. We have some things that are conventional, and then a few things that are unconventional too. And some of those items, were inspired by COVID, where, you saw your kids, you were able to help them all the time. And then all of a sudden they're not there anymore, right? They're at home and you're trying to teach them online, but you're not having as much success as you did when they were in front of you. And that taught me a lot about, trying to give my students the level of independence that they need to function and be successful. So some of these tools were because the kids were a lot further away from us in class. And then a few others are just fun and different and allow kids to be able to be successful. So the first thing is just making sure your kids have really good supplies so that they can be able to own their learning and not feel like the instrument that they have or the mouthpiece that they have is a barrier to success. Cost is always going to be a factor. In the last clinic, they were talking about the impact of the tariffs on music education and trying to lessen that so that kids can still have access to high quality instruments and they can be able to get access to those instruments at the time they need them. So always kind of have your non-negotiables. And for me, my non-negotiables are the right mouthpiece. Like, sometimes we'll allow a student to play with an Amazon instrument because that's what they can afford, or they might bring in granddad's, trumpet, or a trumpet that somebody gave them that may not be the best trumpet, but we know that if that kid is set up well, they'll be able to get a better trumpet later on. So we'll negotiate maybe on the quality of the instrument, and then try to get a really high quality mouthpiece. So for the trumpets at our school, the trumpets at LCI, we start them all on a Bach 5C, and that's so that they can be able to have the flexibility when they get bigger to still have a good mouthpiece. So it's a good all-around mouthpiece. For some kids, it might be a little big when we start, but it's a good starting place for them. And Fax is a company, I think it's run by Music and Arts Guitar Center. They have a lot of really good copies of traditional mouthpieces that work really, really well. So if your student can't afford the Bach 5C, I would suggest the Fax 5C, which is a really great low-cost copy. And the same thing with the French horn mouthpiece. We do the Giordinelli C8, and Fax has a great copy for that. It's different from the Holton Farkas mouthpiece, which is more of a bowl. The Giordinelli mouthpiece is a bit more of a funnel, and it helps take care of their high range and their low range on French horn. The Bach 6.5 AL for trombone is pretty standard, and of course, the Fax has a copy of that. I'm a euphonium player, and I love the Schilke 51D mouthpiece. I play that in my own playing. It's a good mouthpiece that'll take care of euphonium players from 6th grade all the way through college and beyond. And it's a really forgiving mouthpiece. It's a little bit bigger than the Bach 6.5 AL for trombone. And because trombone and euphonium are so different, one is conical, the euphonium is conical. So it's going to get you that, mellow sound, and trombone is cylindrical, and the bore is going to stay the same the whole time. You don't want your trombones and your euphoniums to have the same mouthpiece, right? Even though the Schilke is technically a trombone mouthpiece, it works way better on the euphonium than it does on the trombone. And because it doesn't have like as much resistance when kids get started, your euphonium players will actually get a much better sound from the get-go versus them having a Bach mouthpiece. And then for tubas, we like the Kahn-Helleberg 7B. There's two types of Kahn-Helleberg mouthpieces. I think the other one is like the 182 or something like that. And the throat on that mouthpiece is a little bit bigger, and it's less forgiving for little kids. So if you are going to start with a Kahn-Helleberg mouthpiece, just make sure it's the 7B and not the other one. East Rock has a really good mouthpiece copy. And this year I actually ran into an issue where one of our tuba players, you could play the tuba, but he was just having trouble kind of getting his notes to focus. So we just changed him to the East Rock mouthpiece, which you can find on Amazon. And it just changed his world. He was able to be more successful. It's a little smaller mouthpiece. And then later in the year, we moved him back to his Kahn-Helleberg. Our full supply list for LCI is listed on the Google Drive. So you can kind of see what we ask our kids to start with. But for me, my non-negotiable is definitely the mouthpiece. Our beginners start in 6th grade. So that's a factor as well. If you start like beginners in 5th grade or 4th grade, you may want to look at smaller mouthpieces since they're going to be growing as well. Give your parents preferred lists of brands and kind of do what we did on the slide where you negotiate which kind of mouthpiece you're going to use for if they run into a cost. Do the same thing for instruments as well. Other teaching tools that I use at my band hall is coffee straws, pinwheels, boba straws, all of those types of things. Initially, I would use these things if a kid ran into a problem. Now we actually use these items pretty regularly. So like using the coffee straw is part of our brass curriculum. Same thing with a pinwheel. And the resource I shared on the Google Drive has links to the kinds of pinwheels that we use. It's not really the picture that's in here, but that was the best picture I could find online. And of course, you can get boba straws like online at Amazon or in person, and then coffee straws, at Walmart or Target. But these are items that kind of help overcome little kid issues and require minimal intervention for students to succeed. So like you don't have to be up there in front of your kid directing every bit of their embouchure for them to be able to use the pinwheel or the coffee straw well. So that actually kind of creates a bridge between how to play an instrument and then actually going to the mouthpiece into the instrument. Other things that we'll use are unsharpened pencils, and you'll see a video later on that kind of show you how to train the embouchure mouthpiece using a pencil. For our tuba players, we'll use clear vinyl tubing at the end of their mouthpiece to kind of help them be able to visualize their air and not have to use the full-size tuba right away. And then, I try to make it fun all the time for kids. So like we'll use like Skittles and Starburst and marshmallows. And the marshmallows are great to help them see how much space they need in the back of their teeth. And that's something that they'll remember. And then that's also something they can eat in class. And then they can go and, kind of have that dopamine boost at the end of your class as well. Other teaching tools that are super important that you may not know about, one of them is called a buzz aid or a visualizer, and it's just a mouthpiece cutout. So it's basically a trumpet mouthpiece, French horn mouthpiece, or tuba euphonium mouthpiece. You just cut it off that and you can see what they're doing with their actual embouchure. So if there's something weird happening, you can just take away all of the extra things and see how they're buzzing, so you can be able to better address how their lips need to be shaped. We also use self-portrait mirrors, and we got a class set so the kids don't have to do that. If you have iPads or like a Chromebook in your classroom, you can also just have the kids take out their laptop and practice their face in the mirror. And what we'll do is we'll put a picture, like I got this out of a book that is great, and I share that in the resource as well. But we'll put this picture up for kids to be able to see, and then we ask them to shape their face like it, and you can use that in that as well. And then we also use tuners in our class, and I use tuners in my performing bands, and we started to use tuners in our beginner classes as well, and it's just been great. So it's just something that we do from the start, and you can either use an individual tuner or use tonal energy or the bandmate chromatic tuner, but they just need a visual to see if they're in control of their air, if their air is moving around, or if they're keeping it a steady speed. And then finally, other teaching tools that are near and dear to my heart, kind of building out your curriculum of music literacy. In our band hall, we use Teaching Rhythm Logically and Ready-Made Music. We combine all those worksheets into a book that we bind, and the kids get that on the first day of school. And so simultaneously, while we're working on how to, make a sound and develop as a brass player, we also use these tools. And for most kids, it's not so much learning how to, finger a note. The rhythms are confusing, right? Because rhythms change depending on the music. So giving them a tool that's going to help them be really, really successful. And I know that that's not what this clinic is, but having that as part of your toolbox is also going to help your brass students be able to just play their instruments better, because they'll be more confident and there'll be less time spent on other things. I also try to use a bunch of videos. Habits for Successful Beginning Musician has a great series of videos out there to show your kids how to make a great sound. So if you're not able to model all of the instruments, like I wasn't able to model the trumpet very well for a long time, so I had to find other ways to do it until the kids were advanced enough for them to be able to model for their peers. Another great website on YouTube is Trumpet A to Z, where he talks about all of the different things that you can encounter as a musician. And so even though it's called Trumpet A to Z, it's really applicable to all brass players. So you can show that video to your students or use that to help you better explain concepts. Last thing is I create a lot of supplemental tools for my students. So like whenever we're starting out, I'll give them like this sheet, which basically reviews all the things I've been doing in class, but now they can take it home and they have it in front of them. And I just design it in Canva. And then like, if there's something I'm always telling them to do, like get your chin flat, keep your bottom lip still, I'll have them write that down so that I don't have to say it every day. So like tomorrow, if I said, get your bottom lip flat, I'll ask them after I heard them play their sound, hey, what were my magic words from yesterday? Oh, make sure you do that. And so all of this is kind of designed to give your kids ownership over what they're doing, and also structures your lesson. So like all of the students are able to be able to learn things a little bit better and to be able to develop a little bit faster as well. I design my own awesome pages as well, but if you're not able to do that, like you're trying to figure out like, how do I do all of this stuff because I play clarinet or I'm the only band director and I'm a percussionist, there's other resources like Musical Mastery, which has a teacher's edition. So you can kind of see like, okay, if I'm teaching brass players at this step, I'm going to go ahead and say these words, and that's going to be very helpful too. For French horn, sorry, I went back. For French horn, there's a book called Recipe for Success, which also kind of gives you a step-by-step way to help your French horn players. And they also truncated the book. So there's a bigger book and then there's a smaller book that you can use in your beginner classes for just French horns. And you can replace, like if you have a French horn class, you can replace that instead of using like the Essential Elements book or whatever method book you use. All right, so we've talked about all the different tools. Here's how I kind of approach laying the foundation for students with their posture, embouchure, and their air. We're not going to go through the specific posture for every instrument, just because, again, that's not really what this clinic is. But posture for me is the starting point for everything, right? Everything's going to build on a really good foundation of great band posture. So like on the first day of school, after we've kind of done introductions, we play some games, we'll teach the kids how to sit, and we try to get them to sit with their feet flat, hiney on the hump, and their back straight. We have them practice standing up, and then just sitting back down. So we do all of that just to help them learn how to balance their body so that eventually when we put an instrument in their hand, their body's not changing because we gave them an instrument. The instrument is just going to come to them rather than them moving their body because we put an instrument in it. So they learn how to do all of that. We talk about making sure that their knees and their ankles are lined up with their toes pointing forward. And for some instruments like French horn, they're obviously their feet are not going to be facing the same direction, but like trombones and trumpets, they should basically look like their marching band student sitting down. So we practice the difference between like their band posture and their video game posture. And they sit differently in their other classes too. Like there are a lot of classes at our school that have like flexible seating. So some kids will be having class in a couch or something. And so we teach them how to sit differently for band versus sitting differently in some of their other classes. The posture for your students should be similar across all of the sections. The only difference should be what instrument they're holding. All right, so then we talk about breathing. We talk about the two reasons for breathing. You know, there's breathing to live and there's breathing to play. And we talk about how like everybody's doing one of those right now, right? No one's passed out in band class so far. So we distinguish how like, okay, now to be able to play an instrument, you have to take in way more air than you usually do. And so we talk about taking in way more air than necessary. And then we'll practice breathing exercises with a metronome. So that's one way you can help your students learn how to time their breath. And doing this step before you go to mouthpiece and before you go to the instrument allows them to be able to be really confident at that. And they're going to build those lung muscles a lot better. We do some breathing gym exercises. One of my favorite ones is to have them fold their body over, where they fold over their body and grab their ankles. And then we'll take a breath in and take a breath out. And we'll talk about how their stomach is pushing against their thighs, right? They're going to notice that there's expansion over there. And then they should also notice that there's expansion at the back of their body too. And then we go back to their band posture and we'll practice that and see if they can get those same parts of their body to move out. And already they're taking in more air than necessary. And then we'll practice doing that breathing that's kind of metered so that they're used to breathing deeper and taking in that breath, but not holding the breath and just letting it fall back out. Sometimes we'll put one hand on their stomach and the other hand on their chest. We'll talk about how your lower hand should move before your upper hand does. And so many kids will breathe the opposite way. They'll breathe from their chest and then hold their breath and then let out a bad sound. So instead, we talk about making sure they're breathing deeper, filling that breath all the way down to their chair, expanding really big, and then letting the air out without stopping it. So once your kids kind of have that, you know, they've already been doing all these little steps, you're ready to start teaching their embouchure. So I use this picture over here. That's my general picture, but there's some resources like Band Directors Talk Shop where they have lots of different people. They did a really great job of a few years ago making sure that their pictures were inclusive and diverse. So I got to participate in that process. And so they have lots of different pictures that you can use, not just for brass instruments, but also for other instruments too. And that's located on their Teachers Pay Teachers website. And that's a really great purchase because then you don't have to spend a lot of time describing the embouchure to all of your students, especially like if you have like a class that's like all of the instruments. You can show all of the pictures, then all the kids can be practicing their face at the same time while you go around and kind of monitor things. But we use different pictures to help them understand that their band face is not exactly the same as their regular face, right? It's just still be like relaxed and calm, but it should be activating those muscles so that they're able to produce a really great sound. So things we'll point out is how like in the picture, the chins are flat. Like you can see all of these faces have flat chins. They're engaging their corner muscles. Those corner muscles kind of show up, right? Whenever they get their face set. The lips are flat and touching their teeth, and then their teeth are slightly separated. So this is where you'd use your marshmallows so they can practice that. And if you don't want to get marshmallows, you can also have them like put their pinky in between their teeth. And then they can practice moving the air and feeling how it feels with all of that. We'll also do that pencil trick, and you'll see that video in a little bit. And that isometric tool we'll do is to help get the muscles to wake up. So they're basically feeling how those embouchure muscles work on their face. We'll use a coffee straw and the mirror to help craft the embouchure, and then we'll practice holding it in place, resetting it, and going back and forth so that they're always going back to the same face each time. The next clinician, Lynn Jackson, she talks about how the embouchure is basically a ligature to control the vibrations. So like clarinets have ligatures, saxophones have ligatures, and that's how they're controlling how much the reed is vibrating. And so our embouchure as a brass player functions the same way, right? We create that ligature so that our lips can vibrate smoothly and efficiently. So one thing we'll do after we've kind of described what the embouchure should look like, we'll have the students say the word sim to practice getting their lips set nice and even. And then we'll say poo after that. So we'll practice sim to get the face set, and then we'll say poo to help establish the embouchure and the aperture. So putting it all together. So we'll say sim, poo. And if you want to practice this with me, you can just go sim, and then poo. And what we want to do is make sure that the P where the aperture happens is not too big, right? So, and some kids will say poo, but they won't realize that they need to make it a tiny poo. So we'll use like words like pineapple and porcupine and pepperoni pizza. And I'll have them say all of those words just so that they're used to getting all of their faces set. And then at that point, they've been practicing all those other steps, so they're ready to actually make their first sound. Right, so we're going to do our first video. Greg, will you let me know if the audio has any issues? So here's an isometric trick you can do with your students. We just call it the pencil trick. So what they'll do is they'll take the eraser and put it at their teeth. Their teeth do need to be touching for this to work. So they put it at their teeth, and then they hold on to it with their embouchure. And the goal of it is to get them to realize that all these muscles right in their face have to be activated for their embouchure to work. And so when you set this on their embouchure, they're going to be saving you time when you're learning how to make a sound on their instrument, right? When you're using the mouthpiece, because all of a sudden muscles that they've never used before in their life have come to life, and they're going to be able to control the sound a lot more because they've created this ligature to hold the embouchure in place. So it's based off of what's called the peat. So this is the peat right here, and at least that's how I got to it, but I think the pencil trick probably was invented first. But the peat is a device created by Warburton mouthpieces where you just set the peat against your teeth, and then you do the same thing. So it's just a fancier version of the pencil. It's weighted better. This goes against your teeth, and this is balanced, so you can control it more. A lot of professionals will use this, especially when they know they're going to go through a stretch of time where they can't practice to the extent that they will. This will help them keep their embouchure muscles strong. And this is a really good way to help your students learn how to control their embouchure better. So what we'll do is we'll practice the pencil. We'll see if they can hold it for like 30 seconds. And most kids can hold it for 5 seconds. But basically what you're doing is avoiding those mistakes and problems you have to fix once they get their mouthpiece and instrument, which is their embouchure doesn't have a lot of endurance, so they can't control the sound, right? They can't get those vibrations even. So by doing the pencil trick, you're just showing them how to build endurance over here. And then when they do their first sounds, they all of a sudden go, and you're going to be able to move faster and teach more concepts sooner just because you've kind of fixed a problem that would have, fixed itself over 3 to 4 weeks, but you've just addressed it sooner. So we practice our sims and poos, we say it as a group, and then we'll get our pinwheels and we'll use the pinwheel to monitor airspeed. So this is that second kind of recurring problem that kids have where they don't know how much air to use. We talked about how there's breathing to live and breathing to play. So we'll use the pinwheel to help them just kind of know, okay, I have to really keep my air going. I have to keep my air spinning. So we'll put the pinwheel in front of their face and we'll go sim. And their goal is to get the pinwheel to spin instantly. And if they can do that, I know they're going to be great when they play the instrument, right? Because the vibrations are just going to happen. A lot of times when vibrations don't happen, the kids kind of mash their lips more and they start to squeeze and push the air. By using that pinwheel and just having them blow fast, steady air, you're avoiding that skill too. And you're avoiding having to stop and say, hey guys, make sure you don't squeeze and push to get a good sound. Because those kids who learn from the very beginning that squeezing and pushing helps them get a sound, they're going to keep squeezing and pushing. So you're going to have that recurring problem all of the time. The other thing that we'll do is we'll do coffee stirrer therapy, and this will be for every student from the start. And then if kids are still having trouble, they'll go back and use their coffee straw individually. But basically, the coffee straw helps set the path for the air, right? It helps create that airstream. So they know how much and how wide their airstream should be. Of course, the coffee straw is going to be a little skinny for low brass players, but you can still use that and then explain to them that they need to work on making their aperture a little bit bigger when they play. For trumpets, it also can be a little big. So what you want to do is help them learn how to set their face and then control those muscles to be able to get the aperture smaller for the notes that you're aiming for. Ways we practice embouchure, I try to equip my kids to be able to teach themselves and teach themselves without me having to do it all. So, and it's way less stressful that way. So we'll do sim and poo with a partner, and their partner is supposed to tell them like if their face is moving or if something weird is happening that's causing sound issues. We've taught them to kind of self-diagnose. Then they'll do air on their hand, sim, and we'll talk about like the temperature of the air and blowing the air in the center of their palm. And then we'll move the hand away and see if they can blow the air that far as well. Then I'll also have them like do a mirror where like both of their hands are in front of their face and my face. And I'll blow on one of their hands. And their goal is to match my airspeed. And if they can do that, they're going to be in great shape too. So you kind of see like do some games with them, like see who can keep the pinwheel spinning the longest, and then you go back to that worksheet. And this worksheet is in the drive, and you can customize it if you want or steal things off of it. It really doesn't matter to me, but you can use this to help them again keep monitoring themselves. We do start with nose breathing in my classes, and then we go to breathing through the mouth. So like with nose breathing, we'll say sim, breathe in through our nose, and then blow air through the center of their bottom lip. And then when we go to mouth breathing, I'll have them put their finger on their lip, and then they'll work on breathing around their mouthpiece. So we'll go sim, breathe in, and then they'll move their hand away from their face. So they're breathing in deep. They're feeling the air kind of rip across their finger, and then they'll take their hand off. Other breathing exercises is one I do a lot with our kids, but I didn't put it in the slide deck. You can take the whole hand, put it on your lip like this, and then blow out afterwards. So they feel that air ripping across their finger. And that's another way for them to learn how to take in a lot of air in the time that they have to breathe deep. Other things that we'll do to monitor embouchures, we'll show them how to set their mouthpiece on their face. And then the students with the best embouchures, those are the ones that get to do their sound first. So I'll invite them to the front of the room, and every other kid is going to come up and they'll sit down and they'll watch, and I'll place the mouthpiece on their face. For like a low brass mouthpiece, you want to go you want to place it equal parts top lip, bottom lip, and the same thing for trumpet. For French horn, you want to do 2/3 top lip and 1/3 bottom lip. That's going to give them a good cushion. You definitely don't want the French horn mouthpieces to be the same as the trumpet mouthpiece, because that's going to be too low on their face. And some of those resources we talked about kind of show your students how to set their face so they know exactly where their mouthpiece is. Mouthpieces should be angled slightly down. French horn mouthpiece should be angled way more because of the direction of their instrument. And so just kind of finding a good picture to help your French horn see how their angle should be, and then they can just practice that, and you just keep repeating it so that they self-diagnose and hold themselves accountable. Like I said, place the mouthpieces for them initially, and then have them practice it with a partner, and they just need to practice it like 50,000 times until they can get it right and consistent, because then they'll be able to keep the sound consistent too. This is a picture that I got from a TBA clinic a few years ago. The Texas Bandmasters Association publishes all of the resources from TBA. So even if you're not able to attend, like there's some years where, I was traveling and so I wasn't able to go, but there's a clinic I wanted to go to. So they put all of the different materials from the presenters, and you can go on there and type in the word brass, and that'll basically give you every TBA clinic from like the year 2002. So you can kind of see some things and then take some pictures that you might be able to help your students with as well. So there's another picture I'll show my students. I'll show them how the embouchure for this student isn't tight, isn't firm, isn't like too tight, but it's really firm and it's clear where all those muscles are, like the canines against the corners and all of that other stuff. That's kind of what we do with that. So we'll use this picture for them to help place their mouthpiece. and then we'll go and actually do the performance itself and teach them how to make their first sounds. Right. So with first sounds, we talk about how vibrations should happen by accident, right? We're not forcing the sound to come out. There's a video online of a guy running on a treadmill with an American flag. And so we talk about how, like, the person out on the street running with the flag's going to billow in the wind because of the wind itself. He's not forcing the flag to fly, right? Especially if it's a windy day, it's just going to happen because of all the air that's moving. The person on the treadmill, they look like an idiot because they're running with the flag, but nothing's happening, right? Unless they have some fans powering the flag, they're not going to be able to move that flag at all. And so we talk about how vibrations, when you play your sound, it's going to happen because of the speed of your air. It's not going to happen because you're forcing it to come out. And so we have the kids practice their face. We do sim, poo, and then we make sure that the sound starts with air. We go sim. We listen for that rush of air before we do anything else. And then after they've gotten really good at that, we let them blow the air fast enough for the vibrations to happen. So here's a video of me doing that in our band hall. For the euphonium mouthpiece, I prefer the Shilkey. That's what I start my kids with. Obviously, lots of people love the Box 6.5 AL. It's a good mouthpiece. It just requires them to have a really great embouchure. And especially as kids are moving and growing, a bigger mouthpiece that's more forgiving allows them to kind of grow into it. Then they don't have to have a perfect embouchure to sound great on the euphonium. And this mouthpiece just makes them like have a bigger sound. With some smaller kids, especially if they have really thin lips, they're going to struggle. So you may want to start them on like a 12C or a 6.5 AL. And then as they're going through the year, go back to their original mouthpiece so that they can get that, round, colorful, rich overtone euphonium sound. So here we go. Here's the mouthpiece. Sim. And then you just want to keep that consistent and even as they go. And I would have them practice that several times just so that they're getting that same sound every time. And you can have them see how long they can go, how deep they can go. In that video, you saw that I did breathe through my nose, or maybe I breathed through my mouth, but we'll initially start with them breathing through their nose so that the embouchure isn't moving too much. And then after they're getting more consistent vibrations on their instrument, they can go to the actual instrument. And we do the same process, air to vibration, for the instruments as well. So now if you have a kid that has no sound, you just go back to one of the previous steps, right? They're not getting a bad sound or no sound because they're doing the steps right? If they're doing all the steps correctly, they're going to get a sound pretty consistently. So basically, you just have them go back to one of those steps that they're skipping out on. For instance, if their face is moving too much, go to coffee stereotherapy so they can work on setting their face. If it's an air issue, go back and practice with the pinwheel. Work on resculpting the embouchure. A lot of times kids will change their face when they get their mouthpiece. So what I'll do is have them do mouthpiece roll-ups. We'll put the mouthpiece at the edge of the lip. We'll set their embouchure. We go sim. And we'll move it back and forth so that they can see that nothing changes from that embouchure. They're just doing that same embouchure the entire time. And then after we've done that enough, we'll have them go back and do the sound. Sim. And they'll just learn how to do that. Sometimes we'll also do free buzzing. And free buzzing, some kids aren't used to getting their lips to actual vibrate. So we'll do free buzzing so that they can be able to get their lips to touch. And that might just be the thing that kid needs. And then you can just go back and say, do the same thing. And they can get that right sound. Their lips do have to touch. Their lips do have to be inside the mouthpiece. A few times kids will sing and try to make this throat noise to simulate the vibration. You just have to remind them, no, it's actually your lips that are doing the vibration. So here's a video of me doing some of the buzzing on tuba. And this has the tuba vinyl cord that I was talking about. So I actually don't like buzzing with the tuba mouthpiece because it's so hard, right? And there's some people who will say, well, just cover up the end of the mouthpiece and then they get a little bit more resistance. So let's try that. With the tubas, I try to get them to breathe through their mouth as soon as possible, just because it's only going to make things easier. So here we go. And that's not too bad, right? So it's a pretty clear sound. I'm able to get the kind of resistance. Here it is without me covering up the ending. I ran out of air a lot easier. A good option is to use this right here. This is like a piece of vinyl tubing that you can get at Home Depot. And you just put the mouthpiece inside the vinyl tubing. And I've done different lengths. It doesn't really matter the length. Obviously, you'll probably get different notes as a result. But right now, you're just trying to get the sensation, a little bit more resistance to give them control of their sound. So here's that with the tubing. And already you can hear the sound, you can control it better. And it's really cool because they can also see their air, right? So the foggier it is, they're probably using better air than if it's not as foggy and super clear. So those are some options. This, again, you can go to Home Depot, you just get a big tube and then you cut it into the size that you want, and then you just give it to your kids. Then they can go home and practice with it, and they have that consistency with their sound too.
And you can do that with your big kids too. So you don't necessarily have to only use the vinyl tubing with beginners and then never touch it again, right? Because it's such a good tool and allows them to center notes a lot better. So after we've kind of learned how to make sounds on our mouthpiece, we talk about the parts of a note. And this is something that our kids need to understand from the beginning of sixth grade all the way through when they're no longer playing their instrument, right? So the note always starts with a breath. Then there's the start, the sustain, and the release. Students have to work on holding all parts of the buzz still to be able to sustain their sound correctly. And this is where we use our tuners and tonal energy. So tonal energy has a desktop version now. So we'll put that desktop version up on our projector, and then I'll show them my sound. They'll see how big and full and in tune it is. And then I'll find kids and I'll have them do the same thing. And they'll see how like their sound's weak and unsustained. And that allows them to learn how to manage their sound better. If you're not great at modeling for kids, use a drone or find the best sounding kid and show them, look at how clear and still your sound is. And then we'll also like draw their sounds on the board. And I'll be really like shady about it. And I'll draw like bacon, I'll draw like explosions so that they understand that, okay, when I started my sound, my start exploded instead of being a clear start, right? So I have to learn how to manipulate my embouchure so that not all of the air explodes at once. And then we'll talk about the brick of awesomeness, which is basically that same square note we're talking about. And then they'll get a copy of this so that they can remember how to keep the sound and understand the concept. After we do mouthpieces, and I try not to spend too much time on mouthpiece, we'll go to mini instruments. And we use the mouthpiece to initiate the sound. But again, we go to mini instruments so they have a little bit more resistance and they're not developing bad habits because they're trying to sustain a sound on a buzz. So for trumpets, their mini instrument is the mouthpiece and lead pipe, and that's going to sound a concert E flat. And on the trumpet mouthpiece and lead pipe, we'll start with just air, and then we'll do the vibration. And that's going to give them a chance to be able to focus their sound, but not worry about having to fill up the whole instrument. With French horn, we'll do mouthpiece in the horn, and they'll remove the tuning slides. With the phonemes and trombones, we do mouthpiece and boba straw. And then for the tubas, we use the clear vinyl tubing that you saw earlier. We always practice with air first, and then we do air to vibration, and then instant starts. Here, a lot of individuals, because especially since this is kind of like, MacGyvered, this is not a real way to play an instrument. Some kids might overblow the mini instrument. So just kind of use your best judgment to make sure that the mini instrument works well for the situation. Keep track of recurring problems because, again, those will transfer to the full instrument. So the kid that's not using enough air, when you go to the full instrument, they're not all of a sudden going to take the best breath ever. They're still going to use bad air and get a tiny sound or no sound at all. So just keep reminding them and keep going back to those things like the coffee straw and the pinwheel, because these are little kids. They're going to forget stuff. So the more you can help them remember and practice the muscle memory of how it feels, the easier it'll be when you transfer it to the full instrument. So some common sound mistakes that you might see. Kids are moving their face when you add the mouthpiece. So again, practice doing air while adding the mouthpiece and taking away the mouthpiece roll-ups. Focus on not forcing a sound, that's what that should say, and instead letting the air initiate the vibration. You can do air only on the mouthpiece. Use the coffee straw to help them focus on the airspeed and contact point for vibration. And then if they're getting a tiny buzz, make sure that the sound isn't pinched or forced. A lot of times it's because the embouchure is too tight, right? So get them to just get more air through the lips and let the air do the work instead of the forcing it with your embouchure. And then do the same thing. Practice breathing exercises. We'll still do our breathing exercises even though we are now using our instruments and using our mini mouthpieces and our lead pipes and stuff. Right, so building the structure, getting to the actual first sounds. So the first thing that we'll do when we're working on the full instrument, we just go through the steps again. We do the same steps as mouthpiece and mini instrument, and we find the student with the best vibrations on the mini instrument because that kid's going to be your rock star. And you're always trying to find all the rock stars because you can push them faster, and you can also help them make sure they understand their role, because they can be a good leader and they can be able to model, especially if you're not able to model sounds on those instruments. If they're doing it right, it should be a really smooth transition. They should be able to go from mouthpiece to mini instrument to instrument and make a great sound the whole time. Do the sims and poos, practice with air through the instrument. This is important because they're going to learn how the air is going to travel through the instrument. If they're not practicing with air, they won't really have that visual of where to go. And then we also talk about like visualizing the distance their air travels. There's some websites like Yamaha has a website, and David Worden, professional euphonium player who played with one of the military bands, has a great website with resources for euphoniums. And they have this visual that kind of shows them, like when you press down a valve, this is how far your air has to travel. When you press down all of the valves, this is how far your air has to travel before the instrument actually makes a sound. And so helping them visualize all those things and then going back to air to vibration will help avoid mistakes that'll happen because they're so excited to make their first sound. Always hear individuals down the row because they're excited, they're going to skip steps. So make sure you practice the steps for them. And then once everybody is consistent, start practicing steady sounds as a class. And I don't care what note they're playing. We'll just play like a note for 4 counts. And we'll kind of do this chant that's set to breathe, play, and they make their sound. And we'll do that like 30 times just so that they're practicing getting a consistent sound before we start to troubleshoot everything. So for first notes, as we're setting the kids, these first notes should just kind of happen because their faces are low-key being set up for it. Trumpet should ideally get a G, but a full-sounding C can become a full-sounding G. And you can just kind of work on helping them find ways to be able to move around the instrument. Air support and embouchure is what they need. If you have a kid that's like getting a low C or what we call cow, which is like below the low C, it's an embouchure thing. So you just got to get them to set their embouchure, keep their bottom lip still, and get a lot of air across the bottom lip. For French horn, we like to do E or G. And then with the French horns, we actually start using their tuners immediately. So when we attach the mouthpiece to the full instrument, we'll use the tuners so that they can work on like not letting the note change all the time. And then all of a sudden, they've become more dedicated to finding the right pitch initially versus, learning how to listen for that because they don't know what the notes sound like. So they can't really hear it. So giving them a tuner helps them build that visual and can control their embouchure. And then going to, okay, now hear the note before you play it will also help them set their face and be able to hold it still. For trombone and euphonium, it should be an F that they start on because of the coffee straw. Anything else that they get is because their bottom lip is too loose or they're not using enough air. And that's kind of one that I'm, pretty non-negotiable on. It's like, okay, guys, you have to get an F. Your embouchure is bad if you're not. And then for tubas, we aim for F or high B flat. If they're getting high B flat, that's great because they can relax their bottom lip and just slide down to F. Also introduce basic lip slurs to kind of help kids find the way around the instrument. Because if they can do that, then they're working on not only holding their embouchure still, but they're also working on making small changes to it when they play. We talk with the students about air to the spot. So every instrument has a place where they need to send their air, which is going to give us the optimal vibrations. So on trumpet, we talk about sending the air to where the slide turns. So when we practice lead pipe playing, they're actually already learning how to do that because they're just blowing the air to here, right? And then when we add the full instrument, they're learning to still blow the air to here. With French horn, we talk about blowing the air to where the pinky ring is, and that's a good place for them to visualize sending their air in a straight line. The air still has to travel through the full instrument, obviously, but they're sending the air to the spot so that they kind of have a place to send it. with trombone, euphonium, tuba, trombones were sending it to the bumper. And trombone's so fun because the kids are seeing that the instrument length changes on every note they play. So when they're sending their air to the spot, to the bumper might be here for first position and then all the way over here for fifth position. They still have to send their air to the spot. For euphoniums and tubas, they'll send their air to where the slide meets the first valve, where the lead pipe meets the first valve. And again, that's a really good place to kind of focus their air and center it so that it sounds really good from the get-go. So ways to practice first sounds. We'll practice with long note contests. We'll do some down the rows. We'll do I play, you play. I love I play, you play. When they do their first test for me on their instrument, we do what's called the same sound 3 times test. So they have to produce a G 3 times or a C 3 times or an F 3 times to make sure that they're consistent with their embouchure. We'll do what's called solo class, which is where the whole class plays for 4 counts, then you rest for 4 counts, and then everybody, then we hear an individual, and we do that around the room. We talk about remembering what it sounds like and what it feels like. We also do games like Don't Drop the Baby and Don't Break the Chain, which is basically like holding their note steady and then going to the next person, and that next person also has to hold their note steady. Allow students to experiment, play on their own. I'll let them practice on their own in class in front of me so I can see what they're doing. I'll say, okay, practice that for 2 minutes, and then I'll see how they're going to go home and do it, and then we can kind of talk about what we saw and ways to make it better. Once the other instruments get consistent with their instruments, usually around same sound 3 times, we'll add tuners for every instrument and work on keeping the needle still. A lot of the issues that brass players have in the first 6 weeks is actually because their sound is unfocused. So like you're sitting there trying to address all these different issues, but if you can get them to work on holding a needle still, they're going to fix a lot of their tone by themselves because they're seeing that the needle is moving. It's a game to them. And then you don't have to do as much to talk about it. The more like we reduce band directors talking at students for a long time, and the more students get to play on their own, the easier it's going to be for them to make their sound great. We teach students to set their tuning slides so they also know how to center the pitches. You don't want to like go like 2 months, 3 months into playing without them having this tuning slide set, because then they're going to learn to hear notes out of tune and think that the out of tune sound is the correct sound. They're going to learn to play above the center of the pitch, and you want to help them learn to play in the center of the pitch before you ever go to buzzing and all those other things. So here's a demo of me doing my first sounds on French horn. Please be forgiving in the comments. All right, so first sounds on the French horn. Our goal is a G. But if they can't get a G, as long as everybody can get an E, we're in good shape, because then we can move up and down from there, right? If they're getting a C, that means their bottom lip is too loose. Most kids should be able to produce a C. So if you're making C like your target note, I would recommend against that, just because they're not building the muscle on their embouchure that they need to if they're just getting a C. If they're getting an E or a G, you know that they have that potential to go higher, and it's going to be way easier for them to go lower, right? So here's E. If I'm getting a C, what I'm going to do is tell the kid to firm up their bottom lip. Or grab their coffee straw and use that to help shape the embouchure, and then we're going to go back and do it again on their instrument. You can also have them like learn how to go a little bit higher, right? So if you start on C, and then you can go up to D. If they're getting B flat, then you definitely know that they don't have any sort of firmature, musculature on their embouchure whatsoever, because they're just keep going lower and lower, right? So if I'm going, everything's way too loose. Right, and then here's a little bit of tuba. All right, so with first sounds on tuba, again, you want to try to get an F, but you might also get some kids that may overshoot, right? You might get some kids that play too high. So you do your simpu, your inner vibration. Most kids will use too much air at the start of the note, so you just want to help them relax. With tuba, we try to just get them to do horse lips so that they're relaxed from the very beginning. If they're doing horse lips, they're not going to over buzz and be too high like if they're playing euphonium. Like if I'm playing euphonium on the tuba, My arm is just going to look like that, right? That's how I'm going to get that higher sound. Right? So when you teach them how to do horse lips, and you just do that from the very beginning, they're going to get a more relaxed buzz just because of it. Then the tuba mouthpiece is just going to capture the buzz. So you'll probably end up with kids who play like a low B flat, which is what you want. You can always work them up to that F, but if they can get that low B flat out, then you're not going to have to really work on convincing them how to play that low from the beginning, right? So just going a little bit faster. Before we ever get to music, I'll give kids a sheet that looks like this, which works out all of the warm-ups that we're going to be doing. And I have the warm-up written out with music notes as well, but this allows them to kind of process it. So we're scaffolding all of the learning instead of overwhelming them with everything all at once. So everything that I have on these first sound sheets that I give my students is basically the steps that I practice with them in class, but now they can have this guided practice worksheet to take home. So it's all written out, and you can customize it for yourself, with whatever skills that you're teaching, so that you're not dependent on a book before the kids are truly ready to use one. Changing notes, we do a lot of air direction exercises. We practice bringing their top lip down and moving their face. I'm going to go a little bit faster so we can have some time for questions. But these are ways that we help kids learn how to change their notes after we've done all of the different things. One really awesome thing I saw in a clinic by Ross Patterson, who's a band director in the Dallas area. He talked about how when you do a lip slur or change pitch, we see a picture, not a movie. So the kids have to hold their face still. And think about all the concepts that they need to be able to change sounds after they've gotten started. Articulation is a big deal. We go through these steps. Like I give them the rules for tongue touches is what I call it. And then after we've learned the rules, we'll practice it. So we'll do poo, two, two, two. We'll say that. And then they'll practice air on their hand. And then again, we'll go through all of the different vibrations so that they can be able to do everything correctly. So once you've gone through all those steps and been super detailed, you're able to go faster. You're able to do all of these different concepts a lot quicker, just because the kids don't have as many problems that you're constantly starting to fix. Some resources that I love are on the Texas Bandmasters Association, and then a few of these other places too that I talked about at the start. And all of this is listed in the handout that's on the Google Drive too. All right, so thank you so much for listening to me yap for this long. We're going to go over to some questions.
Okay, I'll kick it off. Bennett, let's say you have the kid is starting their second year of band, they're in a performing band, and somehow they are playing with tight sounds. What would you do to help release those sounds?
Yeah, I think I would just go back to doing air. And again, pinwheels, coffee straws, all those things we did in the initial steps in beginner band. Every kid is different and they're going to grow in different ways, right? So I would just go back to some of those steps that they might have skipped in beginner band without being condescending about it. I would do a lot of airflow through their mouthpiece. And just get the sound to be really, really big and full, and then go back and play it. And they're going to have one note that they're going to be good at, right? They might be good at concert F. They might be good at concert B flat. I would have them work on getting that nice, relaxed sound on concert B flat or whatever it is, and then just work up to the notes that are a little bit harder.
Okay. Let's see. Someone asked, how would you address increasing range?
Yeah, so increasing range for different instruments, I would always just start with sirens and pentascales. So the first pentascale that I teach, like after the first 6 weeks, is the F, E flat, D, C, B flat, and we just go down. And then we slowly increase it. So like when they're ready for playing G, we just do C, D, E, F, G, and then we'll do like E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat. So we'll do some of those pentascales, but we'll also do flow studies pretty early on and lip slurs. And I'll introduce lip slurs around the same time I'm introducing articulation so that they're learning how to be flexible here. Because like in that first semester, the kids are pretty flexible. They're so excited to learn that the more little tiny things you can give them from the start, they're going to kind of go home and try to manipulate that. But with lip slurs, we could do some free buzzing where they go, and they just learn how the face needs to move. Then they go back to their mouthpiece and do the same thing. And then you can use that to help them build their range. I try to build range slowly for kids. There's some kids that will be able to play the higher notes, but you never want to stress them out about playing high because that's going to lead to other issues and other problems.
Okay. Someone asked, what is the balance of time that you spend on instrumental fundamentals versus the band book during the year?
I love this question. So I use the band book extensively till about January, February, and then we switch to other things. But I create my own warm ups, and the kids are just used to that. So they don't even really have a concept of I need to be playing songs in my book because we do so much on the warm ups. And the warm up sheet that I create for them, every class is customized. I mean, the names change, so they look forward to it. But we do a lot of stuff on there so that when they go to their book, it's easy to play. And the reason I do the books so that they can be literate, of course, and we'll do songs out of the book, but that's all we do. And we probably do it at most 15 minutes in the book per class. The rest of it is spent on fundamentals or music literacy so that they can do more than what the book asks for them later on.
Gotcha. Well, Bennett, I am so thankful that you were able to be here with us today. You shared lots and lots of information with us that is sure to help us as we move throughout the year. So, again, thank you for being with us at Austin Clinic.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation. Take care.
Thank you.